It's no fault of Elvis. He loved the song.
She is America's sweetheart, the woman with the biggest heart in country music. The sparkling smile, the legendary voice, and a generosity so vast that she's given away over 200 million books to children who needed them. Dolly Parton is, by almost every measure, the most beloved figure in the history of Nashville. She is the kind of woman who makes you believe goodness is real. And yet, if you look closely enough, if you peel back the rhinestones and the laughter and the carefully crafted image of Southern grace, you will find a woman who has been tested, a woman who has been betrayed, manipulated, mocked, and underestimated, a woman who, beneath that dazzling exterior, has a memory like a steel trap and a backbone forged in the mountains of East Tennessee. They smiled at her in public. They sang her praises on award show stages. But behind those closed doors, some of the biggest names in the music industry gave Dolly Parton reasons to walk away and never look back. One tried to own the rights to her most personal song. Another sued her for millions after she dared to pursue her own dreams. One publicly humiliated her in a way she called the most devastating moment of her life. And others questioned whether her art was even worth taking seriously. These are the 5 singers and figures Dolly Parton could not stand working with. And once you hear the full story of each one, you will understand why even an angel has her limits. Before we talk about enemies, you have to understand origins. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee. She was the 4th of 12 children raised in a mountain home so modest that the family had no running water. Her father, Lee Parton, worked the land and worked construction, and though he could not read or write, Dolly has always said he was the smartest man she ever knew. Her mother, Avi Lee, filled the home with music, storytelling, and faith. For a family like the Partons, music was not entertainment. It was survival. It was how you felt something bigger than poverty. Dolly was performing on local Knoxville radio by the time she was 10 years old. She sang at the Grand Ole Opry before she had a driver's license. And the very day after she graduated high school in 1964, she packed a single bag and caught a bus to Nashville with nothing but raw talent, and a dream so large it barely fit inside her. She started writing songs for other people, hustling in the background of Music Row. But Dolly Parton was never meant to stay in the background. Her first charting hit, Dumb Blonde, arrived in 1967, and it was perfectly chosen because Dolly Parton was never dumb, and she was never going to pretend otherwise. That same year, she was invited to join the Porter Wagoner Show, one of the most widely watched country music programs in America. Porter Wagoner was already a star, flashy, charismatic, and deeply shrewd about the business of country music. Porter had built an empire on his own terms. He saw something in Dolly and brought her in to replace his previous female vocalist, Norma Jean, a change that did not sit well with fans at first. Some audiences booed. Some wrote angry letters. But Porter insisted on keeping her, and Dolly, ever gracious, stayed calm and kept working. What followed was one of the most successful partnerships in country music history. Together, they scored more than a dozen top 10 hits. Their harmonies were electric, and their chemistry undeniable. But beneath the surface, a very different dynamic was playing out. Porter Wagoner did not simply want to perform with Dolly. He wanted to control her. He made decisions about which songs they would record, manage her public appearances, and held final authority over most major career choices. For a woman who had been writing her own songs since childhood, who had her own vision of where she wanted to go, this arrangement became suffocating. The more famous Dolly became in her own right, the more she wanted to stand alone. She was writing songs that did not fit the duet format. She had ambitions that stretched well beyond the confines of their television partnership. She later confessed that Porter genuinely struggled to see her as his equal. In the beginning, his platform had been a gift, but over time, that same platform had become a trap. By 1973, the tension was nearly unbearable. Dolly left the show in 1974. Publicly, the split appeared cordial. Behind closed doors, it was only the beginning of something much darker. 5 years later, Porter came back with lawyers. In 1979, he filed a $3 million lawsuit against her, claiming she had broken her contract and owed him for management fees tour expenses, and a portion of her earnings since leaving. For Dolly, this felt like a betrayal that cut to the bone. She had always seen Porter as a mentor, flawed as he was. She quietly settled the case out of court, refusing to drag him through the mud publicly, even as she felt devastated privately. Years later, she said it simply. He was just having a really hard time letting go, because so much of their careers and their emotional lives had become bound together. He could not hear that she needed to be free. She heard it, and she left anyway. Time, though, has a way of changing things. In 2002, Dolly inducted Porter Wagoner into the Country Music Hall of Fame and spoke warmly about what he had meant to her career. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2007, she visited him in the hospital. Weeks later, he passed away. Dolly held a tribute concert at Dollywood. Not for the press, not for the cameras, but for the man who gave her a stage before she had one of her own, even if he later tried to keep her from leaving it. The relationship with Porter Wagoner remains the most complex chapter in Dolly Parton's career, a story of gratitude and grief wrapped around something that looked, for a long time, very much like a cage. There are moments in a career that define everything that comes after them. For Dolly Parton, one of those moments arrived in the mid-1970s when the team representing the king of rock and roll came knocking with an offer she was supposed to be grateful for. Dolly had written "I Will Always Love You" in 1973. The song was deeply personal, written as a farewell to Porter Wagoner as she was preparing to leave his show. It was a song about choosing yourself, about leaving with love and without bitterness. It charted at #1 and established Dolly not just as a performer, but as one of the most gifted songwriters of her generation. Then Elvis Presley's camp came calling. Elvis loved the song. He wanted to record it. For most artists in that era, having Elvis Presley cover your work would have been considered the ultimate endorsement. But Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's notoriously aggressive manager, came with a standard demand: a full 50% of the song's publishing rights. He wanted half of everything the song would ever earn, in exchange for Elvis putting his name on it. Dolly said no. She later recalled telling his manager that this song was the most important copyright in her entire publishing company, and that she simply could not give it away. She felt bad for Elvis, she said. She genuinely admired him as an artist. She understood that he truly wanted to record the song, and that he was upset by her refusal. But she also understood something crucial. If she handed over half her rights to Elvis's manager, she would be setting a precedent. Every manager, every label executive, every powerful figure in the industry would know that Dolly Parton could be pressured into surrendering her work. Elvis, by her account, never quite forgave her. There was a noticeable coolness between them after the refusal, a shift she felt but could not openly address. She has described feeling heartbroken by the fallout, given how much she respected him as a performer, but she did not waver. The decision turned out to be one of the wisest she ever made. Nearly 2 decades later, Whitney Houston recorded "I Will Always Love You" for the soundtrack of The Bodyguard. Houston's version became one of the best-selling singles in the history of recorded music. The royalties it poured and made Dolly Parton a wealthy woman many times over. She has joked about it publicly, laughing about crying all the way to the bank. But behind the laughter is a serious truth. She protected her art, stood her ground against one of the most powerful forces in the music industry, and was proven spectacularly right. Some feuds erupt loudly. This one simmered quietly beneath the surface of one of the most celebrated musical collaborations of the 1980s. In the mid-1970s, Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, and Emmylou Harris found themselves in each other's orbit. 3 women, 3 powerful voices, 3 artists at the height of their individual careers. The idea of a collaborative album was floated early on, and the excitement was genuine. Their voices, everyone agreed, were made to blend together. But getting 3 major stars with 3 separate record labels and 3 wildly different schedules into the same room proved nearly impossible. The project was delayed for years. When the album they called Trio was finally recorded and released in 1987, the result was undeniable. It debuted at the top of the country charts, went platinum, and won a Grammy Award. By any objective measure, it was a triumph. What the listening public did not hear was what went on in the recording sessions. Dolly Parton has always been known for her efficiency in the studio. She has a gift for nailing a vocal quickly, for trusting her instincts and moving forward. Linda Ronstadt worked entirely differently. She was a perfectionist in the most demanding sense of the word, willing to spend hours on a single line until she felt it was absolutely right. These approaches were not merely different. They were incompatible. Emmylou Harris, the gentle mediator of the trio, spent much of her energy simply trying to keep the peace between the other two. Dolly has hinted in interviews over the years at the frustration of those sessions, at the feeling that things moved so slowly she wanted to scream. But it was Linda who eventually went public with her grievances. She made clear in interviews that she felt Dolly was unreliable, that she would cancel plans, show up late, and seem more invested in her solo career than in the shared project. She called Dolly flaky. She said she felt that Dolly's lack of full commitment had damaged what should have been a joyful creative experience. When work began on a second album in the early 1990s, the same tensions returned. Trio 2 was recorded but sat unreleased for years due to label disputes and scheduling conflicts, finally seeing the light of day in 1999. By then, the personal damage was done. Linda Ronstadt made it known that she had no intention of working with Dolly again. The friendship, such as it was, had cooled beyond recovery. Both women have since shown flashes of warmth toward each other in public, but the closeness they might have had never fully returned. The trio legacy endures and fans celebrate it still. But behind it is a story of two brilliantly talented women whose working styles were so fundamentally different that even extraordinary music could not bridge the gap between them. If the feuds with Porter Wagoner and Linda Ronstadt were the kinds of conflicts that emerged slowly, built from real professional friction, what Howard Stern did to Dolly Parton was something else entirely. It was sudden, public, and deliberately cruel. In 2008, the Howard Stern Show aired a segment in which Stern's team had spliced together clips from Dolly's published audiobook, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, to fabricate a fake interview. Using her actual recorded voice, they assembled fragments of words and phrases to create the illusion that Dolly was saying vile, racist, and sexually explicit things. The fake recording made it sound as though she was insulting fellow artists, including Kenny Rogers and Linda Ronstadt, making crude remarks about her own body, and engaging the kind of talk that was the precise opposite of everything Dolly Parton represented publicly and privately. Howard Stern and his team laughed about it on air. To them, it was a shock segment, the kind of provocative stunt that had made Stern famous and controversial in equal measure for decades. To Dolly Parton and her millions of fans, it was something far more serious. Dolly issued a public statement that was rare in its directness and emotion. She said she had never been so shocked, hurt, and humiliated in all her life. She said she could not believe what had been done to her. She called the segment extremely vile and hinted at potential legal action, which was extraordinary coming from a woman who almost never threatened anyone with a lawsuit. She described herself as completely devastated. The public reaction was fierce. Country music stations rallied around her. Longtime fans flooded online forums in her defense. The backlash was real and substantial. Howard Stern's response was to dismiss the controversy as people being too sensitive. He called it satire and said no real harm was intended. He did not apologize. To Dolly, the wound was deep, and she did not rush to forgive it. For 15 years, she did not appear on his show. Then, in 2023, she came to promote her rock album Rockstar, her most ambitious and boundary-breaking project in decades. She walked into a studio with her head held high, promoted her work professionally, and showed the world once again exactly what she is made of. Stern was noticeably respectful, even reverential. He called her a legend. He held back the sarcasm. Dolly was gracious, as she always is in public. But people who watched that interview closely could sense that she had not come because she had forgiven him. She had come because she had something to say to the world, and she was not going to let an old wound stop her from saying it. That is Dolly Parton. She does not let the people who hurt her define what she will or will not do. She moves forward on her own terms. Not all feuds involve lawsuits and fabricated recordings. Some of the deepest wounds come quietly, wrapped in a language of artistic criticism, delivered by someone who should know better. Jeff Tweedy is the founder and frontman of Wilco, one of the most critically respected bands in American alternative and roots music. He is a serious songwriter with devoted following among people who care deeply about lyrics, about craft, about music that reaches for something difficult and true. His reputation in that world is substantial. And so, when he chose to comment publicly about Dolly Parton's songwriting, people listened. In an interview that made significant waves in music circles, Tweedy acknowledged Dolly's place in the history of country music. He was careful not to be outright dismissive, but the thrust of his comments was clear. He considered her lyrics superficial. He felt that her songs prioritized catchy hooks and broad appeal over the kind of complexity and depth he valued in truly great songwriting. He compared her unfavorably to writers he believed delivered more meaningful and challenging work. He suggested, in essence, that Dolly Parton's enormous success was driven more by her larger-than-life persona than by the actual quality of her art. Then came the line that spread most widely. When asked whether he hated Parton, Tweedy said he loved her, that all he knew was that she had written Jolene, and I Will Always Love You on the Same Day, and that in his opinion, she should have stopped after Jolene. It was designed to sound like a compliment. It was not received as one. Dolly Parton has poured her own life into her songs. Jolene was written about a real woman. I Will Always Love You was written on one of the most emotionally charged days of her career. The songs she has written across 60 years of professional life are not exercises in style. They are direct expressions of her experience, her faith, her heartbreak, her humor, and her humanity. For a fellow musician to suggest that her catalog was somehow thin or unworthy of serious consideration was not merely a critical disagreement. It was a dismissal of her life's work.